In this video, I'll take you through the creation of my Frankenstein PHAT PlayStation 3, where I swapped the original GPU for a 40nm chip, gave it a custom water cooling backpack, and added a Frankenstein-inspired aesthetic. I'll share the ups and downs of the process, from unexpected challenges to the final unnatural glory that is Frankie. And I'll show you how you can bring your own FrankenPHAT console back to life. I've had this idea mulling around in my mind for a couple of years now. You've seen some Easter eggs hinting at this project in some of my previous videos. You might have thought they were just a metaphor, but no, I've been leading up to this for a few years now. And this video is the culmination of about 5 years worth of hard work and planning. I hope you enjoy. In September of 2022, I purchased a lot of two motherboards for $60, a COK001 and a COK002. These are the two revisions that have PS2 backwards compatibility, but the COK001 has full hardware-based backwards compatibility and is the subject of today's madness. When it came in the mail, I sysconned it and found it had 58 days of uptime and a mixture of 1001, 1103, and 2022 codes in the error log. There were no signs of previous rework, and it booted when I tested it, so I quickly shut it down before it could overheat. I wasn't expecting that, so I didn't even have the heatsink attached. My diagnosis is that it probably works fine. The 1001s can occur normally from crashing, being forced off, power outages, or if the syscon has to force power off before a graceful shutdown can be completed. The errors are consistent with a working console that's been shut down improperly several times, or potentially overheating with an atypical error. 1103 isn't the usual 1200 I expect to see from an overheating CPU, but it is associated with overheating in the error logs from other consoles. If it overheats quickly, it's possible it could occur alone, I'm not sure. 1103 needs further testing to find its exact cause, but I think overheating is the most likely conclusion. As for the 2022, it's usually a non-issue. It's incidental to people plugging in and out the HDMI or AV ports. Often a video reset resolves it. I don't worry about it when I see them. I'm looking for diagnostic codes like the 1001 or that 1103, things that indicate a more serious issue. 2022 isn't very serious usually, unless it persists with no explanation. There's a possibility the NEC tokens need replaced too, but I didn't perform stress testing to find out. Instead, I baked the board for 24 hours at 100°C and sealed it in an ESD bag with silica gel desiccant for long-term storage, until I was ready to return to it. I just wanted to confirm there wasn't an exotic error indicating something else was wrong with it. My original plan was to Frankenstein mod it, which is where you replace the defective 90nm GPU with one from a reliable model, a GPU transplant. But now that I know it's alive, I'm conflicted. I'm talking about risking the living to prevent a failure that hasn't happened yet. It's one step down the dark side of repair. Basically, I'm contemplating crossing a line even Dr. Frankenstein didn't. He reanimated the dead using the dead. Only a monster would kill the living to save the dead. So yeah, I'm good with that. By the time I was finally ready to Frankie this motherboard, it had been many months since I baked the moisture out. Thanks to the ESD bag and silica gel desiccant, all I have to do is unseal the bag and get to work. Before I forget which board I'm working on, I like to label and date it. I'm going to start with the voltage mod first. I use hot air and flex to remove the BD3520 on VDDR, which is a MOSFET controller that is fixed to an output of 1.2 volts. I just have to add some resistors from a sample book. For the 40nm RSX, I use the diagram in the lower right. This is just a voltage divider, and you can use any combination of resistors where the math works out. You can find resistors that'll get close on donor boards if you'd prefer to go that route. I have more detailed instructions in the written tutorial in the description. This voltage allows the GPU to talk to the rest of the system. This isn't the same as the core voltage, so it doesn't help with overclocking. It's just one of 7 voltages that the RSX needs to function properly. The issue is that it's different for the 90, 65, and 40nm RSX. Since I'm going to be using a 40, I need to reduce this voltage to about 0.95 volts, otherwise the new GPU will die in about a year. We've seen that happen when lazy techs don't trust Sony had a good reason for doing this. And I know a customer that had this happen 1 month after the 1-year warranty expired. So yeah, this is absolutely necessary. I need to install a BD3504, which allows an external resistor network to select the voltage wanted. Next, I remove R2001 and replace R2002 with a 47 kilo ohm resistor. What this does is cut off GS-CLKI, which I think stands for GS clock input, from 1.5 volt RSX VDDIO, which disables the voltage divider. Instead of receiving 0.75 volts, it receives no voltage. I'm not exactly sure why this is needed, but this is how the 65 and 40 nanometer RSX are configured by default, and it's one of the changes Sony made in official Frankies. So we do it anyway. I do know that without R2001, it'll give a 3034 with a 4001 data error, and without R2002, it will give a 3034 with a Southbridge PLL related bit training error. It will work if you leave the default 45 ohm resistor on R2002, but the 47K resistor prevents excessive loading on the source, ensuring good signal integrity. By using a higher resistant value, you reduce the amount of current drawn from the source while still providing a pathway for ground for any remaining leakage currents or noise. I think that's why Sony did this, but I'm not exactly sure. That's my guess, anyway. If there are any hardware developers or electrical engineers watching, let me know why you think Sony techs did this. The last hardware modification needed is to grind away some mask from the ground plane next to R2054. I'm using an engraving rotary tool. I love this thing. I need to remove the 0 ohm resistor here and replace it with a 10K resistor from R2154, but diagonally to the new ground pad I just made. This is a pull-down resistor on CG reset. I'm not sure why they did this either. Perhaps the 65 and 40 nanometer nodes are more sensitive to noise, and it provides some immunity. It could be for timing adjustments, adding a delay that was needed to reset the clock generator, or both. The 10K we stole doesn't need to be replaced. This appears to be an unused resistor for the JTAG port. It doesn't cause any issues to leave it off, and this is how Sony did it anyway, so that's how I'm doing it. Now all that's left to do is remove and replace the GPU with my 40 nanometer. I'm screwing it into a motherboard support bracket that helps keep the board flat during rework, so it can't warp. It'll also help bake out any warp that was previously in the board, like if somebody tried to heat gun it. But this board looks to have been left alone, so I have high hopes. I cover the hole beneath the CPU with aluminum tape, just an ounce of preparation to limit the heat, which can add up and reduce the CPU's lifespan. It takes 10 seconds, so why not? I place the thermocouple next to the RSX, add some flux to 3 sides of the RSX so it'll run underneath without trapping any air bubbles. This just helps it to reflow nicely. Then I start the profile on the Frankenstein, my do-it-yourself VGA rework station. I built and dialed the profile in a previous video, and I love this thing. I customized it to my liking. I accidentally flinched right when I plucked the chip and it knocked several SMDs out of alignment. This is no big deal, I just need to move them back into position, but it did take an extra 15 minutes. So that kind of sucks. Then I cleaned the ball grid array using a T12-1403 blade set to 380 degrees Celsius. The reason it's turning black is because the solder braid I'm using is coated in a rosin-based flux. You can get braid with different flux that doesn't do that, but I don't mind. I just have to clean it a bit more often with isopropyl alcohol. It's important to clean the BGA really well so that the new leaded solder will adhere and have the same amount of solder on each pad. However, you have to be careful not to pull pads. It took me several failed attempts to learn how to do this successfully. Most of the issues I had were going over 380 degrees Celsius or using a tip that doesn't have enough thermal mass to power through the thick ground and power planes of the PS3. I also don't want to press hard, I need to just glide over the surface. The more times you have to repeat this process, the more likely it is that pads will come off. This 40nm RSX was harvested from a Slim, and the ohms looked okay, so I'll give it a try. I previously reballed it with leaded solder, so it'll be ready to go. When the profile is at about 190 degrees Celsius, I pause it to hold the temps there. I gently poke the corner to see if it springs back. This ensures it's reflowed, and if there are any balls that haven't wicked to their pads, the slight jostle can get them to. It just helps prevent cold solder joints and confirms the solder has gone molten. If it moves but doesn't spring back, then the solder either merged and is short, or didn't melt yet. It's hard to know when to nudge by eye, and if you nudge too early, you'll move the chip out of position. That's why I invested in a camera with a 180x Barlow lens. This way I can see the moment it reflows. It just makes this part much less stressful. Now I stop the profile and back away to let it cool. Seriously, I just walk away. After it's cooled to room temperature, I perform an onboard ohm test of all the voltage lines to make sure none of them are short or open. That would indicate merged balls or a fried GPU. While I do that, I'll tell you why I did the voltage and resistor mods first. Other techs don't like to waste time performing them until they know the board isn't going to delaminate or popcorn. And I get that, but I like to err on the side of caution after the new RSX is soldered. I don't like dumping stress-inducing heat into the board after the BGA rework. It's a preference, and maybe I'm worrying about nothing, but that's my approach. Minor procedural things like this can help mitigate potential issues that can add up and make for a longer lasting repair. This is a difficult and premium repair. I'm not trying to cut corners to save time or effort. It takes me about a week to do one of these from start to finish. I'm sure I could cut that to 2 per day if I employed time-saving hacks and cut corners, but I'm not in a hurry, so I'm not going to do that. Note about the RSX PLL, it will often read very differently from board to board. All I'm looking for with that is that it's not short or open. The rest of the voltages seem reasonable too, so far so good. Okay, now I need to auth into the Syscon UART interface and train the system controller to accept the 40nm RSX that I just installed. In order to do this, I need internal access, and I've previously made a Syscon tutorial covering how to do this. You can see me using Syscon Commander, a graphical user interface I developed. This is a beta and is not ready for release. This is a sneak peek. I copy and paste in the Syscon training data for the 40nm RSX from my written tutorial on PSX Place to be sure I don't make any typos. After the changes, I have to fix the checksum at 2 addresses. And hopefully that's it. I should mention that there are some 40nm RSXs with a different ROM revision that require the second string down to end with the byte EB, not EC. So if it doesn't work with EC, try EB. If I get a 3034/4002 error combo with a bit training complaining of FlexIO ID, that can be the voltage mod, or it could be that I need that EB byte. So be sure to verify VDDR voltage is 0.95. It should stabilize for about a second to probe before it yellow lights. And that's everything. If it worked, it should turn on. Let's find out.
Our greatest dread has always been the knowledge of our own mortality. But tonight, we shall hurl the gauntlet of science into the frightful face of death itself. Throw the first switch! Second switch! rise! Do you hear me? Give my creation rise! It's alive! It's alive!
Since this was a bare board, I need to jailbreak so I can remarry the Blu-ray drive. I use EvenLat to dump the EID root key to my USB drive, and then toggle factory service mode. Inside FSM, I can use custom firmware tools to remarry the drive. Once it successfully pairs, I toggle FSM again to get out of there. Now I can test to see if PS2 works. The first Frankie I made worked fine, except PS2 didn't work. That's kind of the entire point of an A model and this repair. So that one really stopped. I'm never going to relax until I know a PS2 game loads. So let's find out. Let's freaking go. Heck yeah, man.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
That is exciting. This feels amazing. I have to say, when a repair this difficult that took me so long to achieve, the wins feel so good. I went ahead and shut it down and proceeded to cleaning. I used an ultrasonic cleaner to get the flux off. I love this thing, it saves me so much time. It used to take an hour of spraying with IPA, turning the board 90 degrees, and then trying to run the IPA under the BGA a bunch of times until it dissolved it all, and I doubt it did completely. But this thing can do it in about 10 minutes. Let me be real with you for a moment. I've had a series of failures. Not just difficult repairs that didn't work out, but there's been turmoil in my personal and professional life that's shaken my confidence and tanked my self-esteem. This repair is more to me than just a console. It's a difficult task with no real consequences that allows me to combine everything I've learned over the last 5 years and prove to myself that through hard work and perseverance I can win pride in my accomplishments. Pulling off a Frankenstein PHAT PS3 was a seemingly impossible goal when I started out. For me, it's a symbolic retaliation to life's punches, a defiant lightning rod for determination and perseverance. There's so much I have no control over, but this impossible task, it's something I can control and have been working towards for longer than most people spend on their collegiate degree. I should know, I have one of those too. In both cases, instead of giving up when it got hard, I got to work. When life makes me feel like a loser, I need a win. And it feels great when you reach the goal. So far, so awesome. In the meantime, I deep cleaned the shelf and also the RF shield. From number 8, the Frankie that had the no PS2. After 5 minutes, I flipped the board and give it another 5. After it comes out, I rinse it off with tap water. Now, tap water has carbonates and minerals that can leave residue that'll short and corrode the board, so you can't just rinse it off and let it air dry. You can use distilled water or deionized water, which doesn't have those minerals, and when it dries it'll be fine. But you can use tap water if you displace the water afterwards with IPA, which is what I'm doing. Then I blow out all the IPA hiding underneath the ICs and leave it overnight to air dry. In the meantime, I use a 3-part plastic polish on the shell to help remove light scratches. It doesn't do much for the deeper scratches, but looks better than nothing. The next day, I delided the CPU and replaced the tokens with Tantalizers. The heat from rework isn't good for them, and they'll often fail a few months afterwards. So instead of having to replace the tokens later, I go ahead and just get it done now while I have it on the bench. I decided to try liquid metal on this console, containing it with an open cell weather stripping foam like Sony did with the PS5. Then I glued the IHS back on using RTV silicone. After another day to let the silicone cure, I fully assembled the console like a little punk. You may recall there's a superstition about doing this. I don't believe in superstition, and was confident it was good, otherwise I wouldn't have gone through all the trouble to clean and delid. See? What'd I tell you? Now I just need to complete my final stress testing regimen to be sure it keeps working. I like The Last of Us for this test. It was a late release and Naughty Dog had optimized the PS3 by this point, so it's a good stress test. What? No! Muurphy! I feel like Zach Lightman, hearing that incessant looping voice of Yoda in my mind.
Taught you I have. Regret this, you will.
But instead of disobeying Admiral Vance's direct order not to pursue the Glaive fighter down the launch tunnel, I disobeyed my own advice and killed a working PS3. What did I get myself into? I chose this console because it should have been the best case scenario for a Frankie to be successful, which I desperately need right now. So Muurphy chose his moment perfectly. I guess that's his MO though. Anything that can go wrong will, and at the worst possible time. I'll be honest, I was thinking about quitting, just be done with this PS3 obsession and YouTube thing entirely. But you know what kept me going? You. You guys were there for me with encouraging comments, and the channel kept growing in subscribers to now over 20,000. I can't just give up. I owe it to you and myself.
This is good. I know people that would just call it good now and ship.
Ever since writing the Frankenstein PHAT PS3 tutorial on the PSX place in 2022, I've been planning this build and YouTube video. Why? You guys asked for it. In my overclocking video, I hit a limit of 950 MHz on the RSX core of PS3 number 12, my A01 Frankie. I fell just short of my 1 GHz goal. One of the most frequent comments was, what if I water cooled it? Well, I mean, it's not practical. I don't particularly like liquid cooling. It's a lot of work to set up, has the risk of leaks, and can get messy. And it has to be cleaned periodically, which I'm not looking forward to. And this was not easy to assemble. Most of all, air coolers can actually outperform water cooling. Given the drawbacks, I've never had a good reason to liquid cool, besides the fact it's cool. But in this case, I wanted to see how far I could overclock a 40nm RSX, and that's what you wanted to see, so here we are. I decided I'd surrender to your demands and give stage to this dark project. First, let me briefly explain what I did to this console and justify my actions, before you get on me for cutting holes in the bottom of the shell after telling you that it's a bad idea. That wasn't me. Someone already drilled holes in the bottom of this shell. It was brittle and cracked, and by far the worst shell I have. So I figured, why not? I was gonna throw it out anyway. When you cut holes in the case, it circumvents the intended airflow pattern and causes the PSU, VRM, and Blu-ray ICs to get hotter, and to mitigate this, I sealed off the lower compartment using a custom-designed 3D printed duct, electrical tape, and using weather-stripping foam. This way, the 4 fans in a push-pull configuration will create the needed suction to restore the intended airflow pattern through the upper compartment. That way I don't need to add a fan over the PSU. By the way, good shells are becoming a limiting factor for these consoles. There are no aftermarket shells for the early PHAT models, and the card reader flap is always missing because scalpers sell them individually for almost the same price as a Yellow Light of Death console itself. It's annoying. I really hope, beg you, modding community, pretty please with a Frankie on top, can somebody please come up with an aftermarket shell for these? Something high quality like we've seen for the N64, Super Nintendo, and others? Maybe it's too much to ask for, since there aren't that many of these out there, only 5 or 6 million. But it would be really cool to have options, or at least a card reader flap. Then I wouldn't need to feel bad about cutting and modifying an original shell, or getting scalped for trying to replace the flap. Anyway, basically, the water cooling loop is entirely bolted to the lower shell, and the upper compartment is unchanged, allowing normal assembly and airflow. This means I don't have to remove the card reader to mount a fan over the PSU. The only things I added to the upper compartment are the wiring for Frankie's brain and voice. His brain is one of those electric arc globes in the shape of a heart that I rehoused in this Frankenstein-themed plant pot. It runs off the 5V Blu-ray drive connector, which is enabled after powering on. That way his brain turns on and off when the console does. His voice is a little MP3 speaker that you can wire to trigger off pretty much anything you want. If you're familiar with Xbox 360 modding, this is basically the Sonos speaker that allows you to choose your own startup sounds. The JQ6500 is a cheap alternative, but the listing I bought was a fake, and what I received instead was an HW896, which ironically, I like better, because I don't need to modify the MP3 to a low bitrate or use any special software to program it. It plugs in over micro USB and mounts like a flash drive. All I had to do was drag and drop the sounds labeled 001, 002, and so on. I wired the trigger to the green power LED, so when you turn it on and off, he speaks. I found another spot on the power ejected daughter board for the eject button, but it doesn't trigger the way I thought it would. It only triggers when the console is off and there's no disc inserted, which is a neat opportunity to say something different. Not sure yet what I'll make him say. Maybe feed me or something. I don't know. There are 5 trigger pins too, so I could add more uniquely triggered sounds. The water pump and 4 fans are connected to the PS3 fan connector. The fans I have are 3-pin, which means they lack PWM, which is how the PS3 controls its fan. I'm not using that wire, but instead of leaving it floating, I used a 10K pull-down resistor to ground. In most control systems, this forces the fans to run at 100% duty cycle. It could be neat to have a 4-pin fan that the Syscon could control the speed of, but this is what I had on hand, and they're very quiet even at 100%, so it's a non-issue. So my water loop is max cooled at all times. I drilled a hole for the pump's potentiometer so I could control its speed from an easy-to-reach location near the reservoir. The cooling loop itself is a cheap do-it-yourself kit that included the 240mm radiator, 2 fans, 2 water blocks, fittings, tubings. I got the hardline kit because I like hardline better. It looks nicer and it's easier to bend into sharp turns using hot air at 230 degrees Celsius. It's not the greatest cooling loop money can buy, but it was the cheapest and most convenient one I could buy. And it works pretty dang good if you ask me. In order to give context to these results, let's use PS3 number 12 as the benchmark. This 40nm Frankie was able to reach the same core overclock at 1.3 volts, but the temps shot up so fast I had to crank the fans to 95%. The temps came down to about 66 degrees Celsius before a yellow light of death put an end to that test. There's something else I noticed. Do you see that artifacting and it looks like green static? At 1 GHz, number 23 had that also. It begins happening at higher temperatures and each overclock lowers the temperature I have to keep the console at to make it go away. I turned down the pump speed so the temps would climb and watch what happened. The green fuzz gets worse. That's what I saw in number 12 as well. Now, both of these consoles have new old stock 40nm RSX made by TSMC. I find it interesting that they both have similar limits in core and temps before this green fuzz starts. It won't go away with voltage boosts either. It gets marginally better, but I tried cranking voltage up on this water-cooled Frankie all the way to the very maximum of 1.6 volts. And while it nearly stabilized, the green fuzz just could not be eliminated entirely. I think at 1 GHz, 42 degrees Celsius is not cool enough to make that stop. Just like at 950 core, 70 degrees Celsius wasn't cool enough on number 12. This makes me think that at 900 it probably would show up at say ADC or something, but I wonder what it is. Like parasitic capacitance, inductance, leakage currents, electron tunneling? I don't know. If you're more knowledgeable about the thermodynamics of transistors and how it might cause these artifacts, let us know in the comments below. But hey, with water cooling, I made it to 1 GHz. Not stable, but still, I'll take it. Goal achieved. Project 1 GHz complete. So yeah, water cooling did help. I mean, I wasn't even able to get there with number 12. I was even able to stabilize 950, something I couldn't do on number 12. Now, its NEC tokens are worn out, which is what caused the yellow light of death. So I might have been able to had I replaced them, but the fans would still have needed to be cranked at max, and I don't know, you tell me, which do you like better? This? Or this? So yeah, number 12's tokens gotta go eventually, but they work fine at normal voltages and reasonable overclock, so I have time. I replaced all the tokens on number 23 with Tantalizers and was able to boost voltage all the way up to 1.6 without causing a yellow light of death, so it was definitely poor filtering. This was a great test for my Tantalizers, which are technically still in beta. I wanted to thoroughly test them before a 1.0 public release. We've been installing them for years and the reception has been positive, but this extreme test could have shown them to be a total dud. I mean, I never expected them to experience an overclock of nearly double the frequency at maximum voltage, adding nearly 60 watts to the console. The exact opposite. I expected them to be overwhelmed at a much lower voltage, and I still would have been satisfied. They were designed to work under stock conditions, not an extreme scenario conjured up by bat-crazy scientists shooting lightning bolts at the poor thing in his creepy lair. But no, they took it like a champ. Man, I'm super proud of those little fellas. And Frankie. On number 12, the temps were becoming too much for the stock air cooler to handle, so I decided it was time to stop overclocking there and back off to my highest stable overclock that didn't require a voltage boost, which turned out to be 800/900, a 37% FPS performance increase over stock at my test location in Murder Crisis, which is a modified version with CVAR values in Crisis 3. The entire point of putting a 40nm GPU on a backwards compatible model is to improve reliability as much as possible, so I don't think voltage boosts are a good idea from a repair perspective. PS3 number 12 was a repair, but with number 23, we're exploring the limits of Technomancy. As you can see, there's not much point to taking it to this extreme. First, many games were not optimized for the cell and are CPU bound, so an RSX overclock isn't going to help that much. Second, in the games that do see benefit, a more reasonable overclock that doesn't require voltage boosts can achieve most of the gains. As you can see, there are diminishing returns to higher overclocks, but you have to go to increasingly difficult lengths and expense chasing them. At what cost? It cost me a couple $100s to build this loop, but it's not just money, it's reliability too. That's the third thing. We don't have any way of knowing how much voltage boosting decreases the GPU's lifespan. The RSX is a custom-designed GPU co-developed in partnership between Sony, Toshiba, and Nvidia. It's based on the GeForce 7800 and Curie architecture, but that was a 130nm node, and the RSX is redesigned over the years behind closed doors. Sony iterated on the Curie architecture down to the 65, 40, and 28nm nodes. We really have no chipset to compare the 40nm RSX to. Nvidia's 65nm chipsets were based on the Tesla architecture, which behaves completely differently when overclocked. So there's no way to know what voltages are safe. There's only one way to find out, and the question becomes, is the hard way worth it? The answer is subjective. I wouldn't daily drive a voltage modded PS3. Overclocked, sure, but only at the max stable overclock without voltage boosting. I'm content with the 37% from 800-900 I got on PS3 number 12. The gains from 950-950 on 23 are nice, but not worth the effort in my opinion. Not to daily drive, no. But I will be keeping this one at 950-950 and see how long it lasts, for science I guess. And to that end, I need some games to play, not just for comparisons. So I need to find games I'm in the mood to play. In my overclocking video, I said that gaming is about escape. I got comments saying that's not what it's about, and I was off base. But I'd counter that, like paintings, music, movies, and video games, good art makes you feel emotion. Whatever you're in the mood for, there's a game for it. I need to escape reality right now, and games that can offer me catharsis are what I'm looking for. Combined with adventure, a vacation, a good talk with a loved one, art can fill the void, offer a sense of release, emotional satisfaction, or stress relief. On the PS3, I chose 10 games that stand out for their ability to evoke these feelings through gameplay, story, or atmosphere, and I'm making it my goal to play through them and see if they can get me through this hard time. So here's my list of 10 games I think might offer me the cathartic emotions I'm looking for. Number 10. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. Why is it cathartic? This is about two brothers trying to find a cure for their dying father. It has an interesting control scheme requiring you to control both brothers at the same time using the same controller. The challenges they face while solving puzzles, combined with beautiful scenery, promises to provide a powerful reminder about the bond of family. I haven't played this before, but it sounds interesting. Number 9. Portal 2. This game has a balance of tension and humor combined with satisfying puzzles. It makes it a good candidate to release stress and bolster confidence, giving you that sense of control and fairness. Number 8. Ico. I've only played a few minutes of this game and decided to save it for a time when I was in the right mood. I could tell it was going to be a good one. Its scale and mystery looks to be similar to Shadow of the Colossus, which makes sense, it's from the same developer. But from what I've read, Ico focuses on atmosphere with minimalistic dialogue and storytelling. The bond you form with the character Yorda as you navigate the castle together looks to be emotional. I expect to be moved by feelings of protection and connection. I think I'm in the mood for a game like this. Number 7. Shadow of the Colossus, PS3 remake. I've only seen snippets of this game, but it's supposed to involve battling massive creatures in a desolate, mysterious world. The gameplay is action-oriented, but the overall tone of the game is melancholic, reflective, and the solitude combined with the epic scale of the encounters I'm hoping will provide a powerful emotional experience. Number 6. Okami HD. Okami is a visually stunning action-adventure game inspired by Japanese mythology and traditional art. Its cel-shaded graphics combined with serene soundtrack and themes I'm hoping will make it a calming and enriching experience. Number 5. Puppeteer. I know next to nothing about this game. The puppet show aesthetic looks to offer a creative presentation and charming story. It's supposed to be a platformer with inventive gameplay. I'm expecting a joyful experience. But who knows, this one could be a hidden gem or a letdown. I think I'm more intrigued by the fact I have no idea what to expect. Number 4. Sound Shapes, a rhythm-based platformer where your actions create music. Yeah, I could see how that might provide a unique sensory experience that's both relaxing and stimulating. I'll give it a shot. 3. Flow is a simple, relaxing game where you control a small organism in a series of underwater environments. The game is calming, with minimal pressure, focusing more on the experience than any particular goal. Sounds like a mindless good time. Number 2. Flower lets you control the wind, guiding flower petals and pollinating the landscape, causing flowers to bloom and bringing color to the world. The serene environments, soothing music, and non-violent gameplay create a tranquil experience that's perfect for winding down. I've played through this once before and I remember it being relaxing. I think it's time for a revisit. Number 1. Journey is an emotional experience with minimalistic gameplay that focuses on exploration, beautiful visuals, and music. The game's progression from desert to mountains is deeply moving, offering a sense of peace and transcendence. I like the sound of the wind, it blends well with the music and nails the emotions I was looking for. I like the sparkles in the sand, reminds me of how light plays off ripples on the ocean, and they use it to great effect. The game's pretty short. I think I finished it in about 2 hours, maybe a little less. It's kind of like a movie where you're basically directed along a fairly linear path with minimal puzzles to solve. This is a special game, and man, I was in need for a moving experience like this. The only thing is, I wish it was longer, like a full-fledged game. It was a good concept, but it left me wanting more. Kind of like this video. I could probably do more comparisons, and I bet you guys have games in mind that you'd like to see. I don't know, maybe you think it's just dragging on, but yeah, it has to come to an end at some point. So here we are. Each of these games offer a different kind of cathartic experience, whether through emotional storytelling, serene gameplay, or the satisfaction of creative expression. And when life gets you down, gaming can offer you the escape and emotional journey you need to bring the joy back. But it doesn't have to be video games, it could be anything. If you think there's an especially moving PS3 game I should try, or one that might benefit from the overclock, let me know in the comments. Speaking of which, it's because of your warm reception and comments I made this video. You have been a surpassing encouragement for me at a time I really needed it, a real boost in confidence. I don't have the words to express the feeling, so I'll let Frankie speak for me, for being part of my journey and there for me when I needed you, from the bottom of my heart.
Muurphy's Law versus Dr. Felix, Frankie, and friends. Final round. Fight!
Ah, get off me, it hurts! Nom nom. Pew 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 pew.
Finish him.
Uh-oh.
Yeah! A reflection of the emptiness, hilarious. You think you're worth my time, you're delirious. Mysterious, because you hide behind a fake exterior. Inferior.
Flawless victory. Elmo Nation.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Gonna learn the consequence of being incompetent. Mental health is confidence, dreams and some honestness. I'm not here to save the day, that's for you to take away. I could play a million mind games, but instead I say something not illogical, something that is topical. Rub it on and watch it go, make yourself unstoppable. Dreams are irresponsible, but they're always possible. If you just believe, you could be so remarkable. Thoughts in my head, a collage and they spread. I'll be great one day, going off of my meds. No, I'm not giving up, no, I'm not giving in. I will make it to the top, taking off in the wind. I gotta make it, I'm saving every day to taste it. I'm patient, but my mind, it can hardly take it. I'm chasing a dream that I've had for several ages, a vacant modern kingdom for the taking. Now that I've been put through hell, I never got anyone's help. I had to do it all myself.